Hello, everybody. Hopefully you can hear me out there. Welcome to Biology 107. So today is our first class, and I've got lots of things to go over today. I think everybody is here joining us. Maybe there's one or two missing, but we're going to get started here right away and get into things. Today we're going to cover the course outline, a few other things, and we're actually going to start the first topic here right away. So let's get into this, and I'll let you know what we're going to do this semester and how all of that is going to proceed. So first of all, let's start here. So there's me. My name is Blaine Legary, and I've been in Fort McMurray now for, I think, 12 years. I have to do the math to double check that. And I'll tell you a little bit about myself in a moment. Our lectures are Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 4 o'clock. Not the best slot, but it's the one I've been given, so we'll have to deal with that. And labs are on Thursdays, and I'll talk about the lab schedule in a few minutes as well. I also have office hours, and if you take a look on Moodle, there are Zoom links for joining the office hours. You can pop in anytime, or you can, when I get back to work, right now I'm working at home, you can always call me at my office as well. So somebody's asking why there's no class on Friday. I'm not going to answer that directly. There's been a couple of things that came up, and we actually have more classes this semester than I normally do for some reason. So in the end, canceling one class isn't going to make any difference whatsoever. All right, so let me tell you a little bit about myself, and then you'll get a chance to tell me a little bit about you. So I did my PhD at the University of Guelph a number of years ago now, and I worked mostly on bacteria, and specifically the bacterial cell wall. So that's actually the target of penicillin. So if you're interested in bacteria and penicillin, you can ask me lots of questions about it. Here's some pictures of my mutants. So the picture on the left is some wild type cells. And the picture on the right are my mutant babies, and you can see the cell shape, and there's differences around the physiology of their cell wall. And anyway, I'm not going to say too much more about that, but we will talk about the bacterial cell wall this semester and a whole bunch of other things. Before we get any further, I do want to talk a little bit about Zoom etiquette. There's lots of things we could say about Zoom, but I'll just say a few things about this class and some things that may work out good for us. Being on time is always a good idea, whether you're in person or virtually. It just makes it a lot easier for me to be organized rather than letting people into a meeting 5 minutes, 10 minutes into class and those kind of things. I know sometimes you're late, and I won't hold that against you, but please do try to be on time. Just in general, be respectful. Being on time is one of those things. And of course, being respectful, meaning that we're not, verbally abusing other people or, anything like that. None of that will be tolerated, of course. I know you're probably not going to be using your camera all the time, but it's always a good idea to, dress appropriately and be aware of your surroundings. Hopefully that goes without saying, right? There might be people in your home. And, if you're being loud, you want to be respectful to them, or, if there's somebody in your background walking around in their underwear, I don't want to see that. So please, think about those kind of things. Like I said, you'll probably have your camera off most of the time, but just, consider those things just in case, you don't want to accidentally press that camera button and we find out you're in the washroom or something like that. That would be embarrassing. Generally, mute your microphone unless you wish to speak. I realize some people have dogs or cats or other people in the home, and so it's a good idea to mute your microphone so that none of those noises are bothering everybody else. If you do wish to speak to me, you can either unmute your microphone, ask a question. I don't mind if you interrupt me halfway. Sometimes it's a good thing. I'm just talking all the time about cell biology, so being interrupted actually is good for me. It helps me get on track and understand whether you understand or not. You can also use the chat function. So it's part of the Zoom settings, and you can ask a question, either about what we're going through, or you know, about something else, and I will try to get to it. That's always good too, so that I understand. If you understand, and make sure that we're all on track for things. I know sometimes I do things like maybe I accidentally might mute my microphone, so it's good for people to tell me those things before I go on a little bit too much. And lastly, come prepared to learn. Hopefully that goes without saying. You're going to get a lot more out of this if you do come prepared to learn and ask questions and think about cell biology, right? You've got this time during the week to think about this stuff, so come prepared to do your cell biology during this hour. Okay, so I hope everyone took a look at the course outlines. I'm going to go through a few things here that are just important to get us going for the class. This is kind of what the class is all about, is obviously learning about cell biology, and you can see generally there is a lab for this class, and so we're going to be doing this all virtually. So most of the lab will be doing lab things like analyzing data and focusing on technical and scientific writing. So that will be a big part of this course, and I'll be talking a lot about that over the next couple of weeks as we get into things. Some people have been asking me about the textbook, and I'll tell you a couple of things about the textbook. This is the textbook we're using, so this is Campbell Biology 3rd edition. This is probably one of the best textbooks you'll own. It's a very, very good biology textbook, and if you're going on in biology, it's a good kind of resource. That being said, my notes are very good. You may or may not find the textbook 100% useful. I don't necessarily expect you to do every reading. If you were to do every reading in this course, it would take you a long, long time. It's a very thick textbook, and I know you probably have other classes. But it's always a good idea when we're going through that unit. I'm assuming that as we go through the unit, that you're flipping through those pages, and that you're looking at that area of the textbook to see if there's, you know, I'm not going to be able to cover everything. I'm going to, you know, in some areas, some semesters, maybe I'm not as complete in other areas, and it's always good to have it as kind of a resource. That being said, there are lots of great resources for biology in other places. There are other textbooks. There are lots of great websites to learn from. So if you don't feel you want a textbook, you can certainly consider that and think about it anyway. There are digital options. You can buy a digital textbook through the Keyano bookstore, and there's a few other places like Amazon and Mastering Biology and whatnot, and those are cheaper options as well if that's something that you want to consider. So anyway, I would recommend for the textbook, if you're going on in biology, it's certainly something to consider. Probably cheaper from Amazon than it is from the bookstore. And that being said, it's a really good book. But I understand that, you know, money is money, and it's not going to be 100% necessary for this course. So if you have any other questions about that, please let me know. So what's your evaluation going to look like? Basically, we have 2 midterms, and we have the lab, and the lab is going to be a significant amount of work, and so we'll talk about that shortly here, and then we have the final exam. So you can see there's some dates right there. So February 12th is our first midterm, so that's a few weeks away, and it'll come fast. Don't worry about that. And we'll talk more about the midterm as we get closer to midterm time. And more immediately, we're going to be talking about the lab and dealing with lab exercises. So we'll get to that here shortly. So one other thing to take note of is the grading system. We have a letter grading system here at Keyano, of which they do, I think, in all of Alberta is the standard. And you're going to want to be getting at least a C- in the course. And the reason why a C- is because most transfer institutions, that will be their minimum grade that they're looking at. I'm hoping people are going to strive for something better than a C-. But generally below a C- is not good. You may not be able to get that credit at another institution. It may be possible. I know somebody who went to Lethbridge and had 1D. I think she had it in calculus, and they allowed 1D. So just something to consider. You do want to, like I said, I'm hoping everyone is striving for better than a C-, but that's about where the cutoff is and where it should be, and that's about a 60%. So what does our lecture schedule look like? We have 20 topics. All of these topics are basically 1 or 2 lectures worth of material. So you can see we're going to start off with a lot of cell stuff. We're going to talk about introduction to cells. We're going to talk about the scientific method, a little bit of a chemistry review, and a lot of cell parts and things like that, prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells. And you may have noticed right there in the middle, I've actually decided what I'm going to do is I'm going to put topic 20 right here at the very beginning. We're going to talk about viruses, and we're going to talk about COVID-19. I feel this is really important. There's a lot of misinformation out there. Lots of people are confused, and I think it's important that right up front that we start talking about viruses and get all of you a little bit educated about what's going on with this whole thing. And we'll also talk a little bit about vaccines, which I think is a very important and obviously current topic. And so after we do those topics, that should be about right, and will get us to our first midterm, and that's in February before the reading week. Then we're going to cover a few more topics, so we're going to switch to talk about cellular energy, respiration, photosynthesis, and the cell cycle. So that includes mitosis and meiosis, and then we'll have our second midterm. And then at the end, we're going to talk about DNA and all sorts of things that DNA does and how that information goes from DNA to RNA to protein. And we're going to finish off talking a little bit about forensics and biotechnology. Usually viruses is at the very end, but like I said, this semester I'm putting a little bit earlier, and then somewhere in April is going to be our final exam. The date I don't think has been set yet. Hopefully we'll hear about that date soon. So hopefully everyone has had a chance to take a look at Moodle. I'm going to actually move to that now and just show you our course Moodle page, and I think there it is. So there's our course Moodle page. So I'm assuming all of you have done at least one semester at Keyano and are familiar with Moodle, but you can log on here with your Keyano credentials, so ilearn.keyano.ca, and go down to your courses, and I'll show you what our Moodle page looks like. So you can see I have a little note here. Sometimes I put little notes at the top just to say, hey, midterm coming up, or maybe a special link or something like that. There's the welcome letter. This is what I emailed to everybody at the beginning of this week. Course outline and links for the Zoom lectures. I have the lectures are going to be recorded, and so there's going to be, I'm going to set up a YouTube playlist, and then a link for my office hours. And so all of those are in Zoom. And of course, you can always set up an appointment for office hours outside of that time if they're not convenient, or if it's more urgent or whatever, that's not a problem. And once I'm on campus, you can always try calling my phone number that's in the course outline. And hopefully I'll be working out of my office in a couple of weeks from now. The lecture notes are going to be here as well. You can see I actually have the lecture notes for topic 1 right here. And you can see, I'll click on that. And you can see this is what my lecture notes look like. And so basically you can see I've got some information here about the objectives of the lecture, the textbook references, and then most of the notes look something like this. So the whole idea is that I'm hoping you will take these lecture notes, download them ahead of time, print them off, and then as we go through the lecture, you're going to take some notes. So lots of white space left in there. I just want to point out a couple of things here. At the end, there are some words, so some terminology, vocabulary, because this is biology and we're going to learn a lot of new words. Some of them may or may not be familiar to you. So it's important that as you review the notes that you do go through these words and look them up in the glossary of your textbook, maybe Google them and figure out what they are, because these are the kind of things that are going to be on the midterm, whether it's definitions or just even in the questions. You're going to hopefully understand what these words mean. And there's also some study questions here as well. And the study questions are not exam questions. They're a little bit more broad and open-ended. But usually when I make my exams, I start here. I look at the study questions and I think, okay, what would make a good exam question? And usually the exam questions themselves are a little bit more specific than the study questions. So back to Moodle there, not everything here is, some of these things are going to be visible to me and not to you. You can see I've got a section for the laboratory, and the laboratory we'll talk about in the next couple of weeks, but I have the lab schedule here. I'll talk about that shortly. And I have the lab manual introduction, and soon at some point I will have lab 1 posted, and this is also where you're going to hand in your lab reports as well. So like I said, more on that in the coming weeks, because we don't have a lab this week and we don't have a lab next week, so you have a little bit of time to sort that out. One note here is this plagiarism recognition course. Probably most of you have done this for another class, so this is something you can work on this week. You can click on this tutorial here, and I'll show you what it looks like. It goes here, and there's a test at the end, and I'm not sure what grade you need to pass the test, but at the very end, you're going to get a certificate, and then when you're done, you're going to click on here, and you're going to upload that certificate for me, because I will not be grading any of your work until you upload that plagiarism recognition certificate. So if you have that, you can do that right away. If not, that's something you can get started on this week as part of this class. You'll probably need it for some of your other classes anyway. So let's talk about the lab. Here is the lab schedule. And so you can see the labs are going to start January 21st. And so the lectures are live, by the way. So basically that means I'm going to be giving the lecture. You can log into Zoom. Although I will record them in case you need to review them afterwards. The labs, on the other hand, I'm going to be pre-recording them. Some of the material I have pre-recorded from last semester. Every time I do a few things differently. And so that will be done. I'll be doing it earlier in the week. And then on the Thursdays, so I think our time slot is 2 o'clock, I will have a video ready for 2 o'clock on the Thursdays. So you'll have the lab material, there will be a video, sometimes some data, and then you're going to basically do some data analysis and write some reports. So this is something we'll be talking about in the coming weeks, how I want these reports written and how you're going to do them and those kind of things. So you can see the way they're designed, and is that so labs 1 and lab 2, there's not a report 1 and a report 2. There's a lab 1/2 report. They're combined, and they would be due the week after lab 2. So that would be February 4th. And so that one is worth 3%. Most of the reports there are worth 3%. A couple are worth 2.5%. So I call those short reports. And you can read about those in the lab manual introduction if you want to download that and learn about it ahead of time. You do have one formal report. So you can see here this lab 3 right here. So that one there is on memory, structure, and function. And a formal report means you're going to have to do the whole thing. So it's like an introduction, you've got methods, results, discussion, references, all those kind of things. And that is worth 14% of your grade. So that is a pretty big one. That's worth almost as much as your midterms, which are 15% each. And for that one there, normally you have 2 weeks to do it, but this time, because of the way the dates fall, you're actually going to get 3 weeks because of reading week. So that's an added bonus. And that's going to be a pretty major assignment. And so 3 weeks to do it will be good for you. If you don't do so well, you can see here lab 7 is optional. And that if you do lab 7, then I'll take the best grade between lab 7 and lab 3. At the very end of the semester, we got a week break in there, April 1st, and then we also are going to have a lab examination. And so if you do well on the labs and you learn how to manipulate the data and you learn how to do all the exercises properly, the lab exam shouldn't be too difficult. All of this is a little bit new for me, trying to do this virtual stuff. I know last semester, I think I made the lab exam a little long, so I'll be adjusting it this semester and that kind of thing. Like I said, it's really just based on all the lab exercises and all the things that you're going to be doing all semester for this. Okay, so how can we do well in this class? I'm not sure what the rumors are like out there about Biology 107, whether it's an easy class or a tough class. I would say it's not my easiest class that I teach. It's also not my most difficult, but it's a lot of work. Biology, there's a lot of memorization. There's a lot of writing, and we cover a lot of material. By the time we get to the first midterm, you know, at first look, it's not going to seem like much, but when you start going through your notes, you're going to realize they're thick and there's a lot of information in there. What are some of the things that are good to know for succeeding in this class? This list here, by the way, I got this from a workshop I went to that was studying what it meant to be a successful student. And I was looking at this list and I wanted to highlight a few things here that I thought were important. So you can see note-taking, writing and editing, test preparation. All those things are going to be important for this class. And I'll try to give you some tips and hints as we go along over the semester. There's kind of this, I remember reading about this years ago, I think actually when I was a student, and it said, you know, for every hour of class, you should be spending, and the recommendation, believe it or not, this is crazy. They said for every hour of class, you should spend 3 hours outside of class learning the material. And then I did the math, and there's just not enough time in the week to do that. But I do encourage you, for every hour of class, you should spend about probably a minimum of 1 hour of time outside of class. Now, I know at the beginning of the semester, you know, things are not so busy, you know, midterms and things like that. But if you keep up every week, get that habit of, you know, okay, you know, this is my time for biology, this is my time for chemistry, or whatever other classes you are. When you do get to the midterm, it won't be quite as daunting. A few other things to say. Consider how you use your technology. Again, another workshop I went to, and he was doing this research on cell phones, believe it or not. And he was getting students to count how many times a day they reached for their phone, how many times per lecture, and things like that. And for some students, it's pretty scary. There's a lot of distractions out there, right? So, you know, think about it. How many times a day are you checking your phone? How many times an hour? You know, if you're doing that while driving, this is called impaired driving. And, you know, I'm concerned about impaired learning. So I'm hoping that you will spend the time in my class, on the class, and focusing mostly on biology. There's lots of studies that show about multitasking and those kind of things. And I understand, yeah, sometimes maybe my lectures are going to be interesting, and other times maybe a little less boring, or you know the material as well, and it's not really a big issue. But I want you to think about how you're learning and what's going to work best for you. So I have this short video, I think it's 2 minutes. I wanted to share it with you, and I think it's all about studying biology, and it's giving some tips for how to be successful. So I figured I'd share this with you and then talk about it for a minute, and then we're kind of done the course outline, and then we're gonna, I wanna just introduce topic 1. So let me play this for you. Okay, I will stop that there, and just really want to emphasize this whole concept of note taking, because I believe it's really, really important to learning. And if you think about it, why take notes, right? Uh, Helps with memory and understanding. You're relying on yourself and not others. Helps with studying for exams. It's a useful record of what actually was said in class. But one thing that they're kind of talking about in there is how you're taking your notes, and then I think the one thing I really liked is how they talked about making condensed notes afterwards. And what you're really doing at that stage is you're forming memories in your brain and you're organizing it in your own brain, right? Sometimes biology, it looks easy, right? You know, when I present it, I've been doing this for years. I understand it very well. It's very clear in my mind. It makes so much sense. But what you need to do is form it organized and clear in your mind. And so taking notes is really, really important as part of studying for biology. I also encourage you, when you're studying, to talk to your classmates, anybody you know who's taken the course before or similar courses, and see what they've done. There's a lot of different methods out there, and you know, some things are going to work for different people. And we'll talk a little bit more about studying when we get closer to the midterm. I'll have some more tips for you. So a few other things. Please come to class. Please do the assignments. Ask questions. Lots of questions are very good. If you're concerned about your assignments, you can show me some rough work ahead of time. I don't mind. I can do all those kind of things and help you get through it. My goal is to see all of you succeed and do well in this class, and hopefully you come out of it loving biology. That's what would be wonderful from my perspective. So one other thing we're going to do this semester is we're going to do some Kahoots. So this is an app, and I would like you to download it on your phone or tablet or whatever. And I'm not going to do a Kahoot today. I'm going to do one next day at the beginning of class. And it's kind of like these little quizzes, and they're kind of fun. And hopefully it gives you an idea of what you understand, and gives me an idea of what you understand. And just one way we're going to try to break up the classes a little bit, because I understand sitting in front of a screen and just sitting there passively for a while can, you know, that it gets a little tiring. So the Kahoots will hopefully break things up a little bit. And last part of the course outline, just for fun, donut mitosis, if only. Look at that. Hey, doesn't that look delicious? Of course, everyone's thinking about dinner now. Okay, so that's it for the course outline. Please take a look over it. I've probably forgotten something. I can't remember everything. I think I've gone over the important things. What you want to do is go through and, you know, write down all your dates in your calendar. You know, the midterm's going to come fast. We're going to start the labs soon enough, and things are going to get really busy. So it's important that you get organized right up front at the beginning of the semester. Okay, so I'm going to stop this share for a moment, and what I'm going to do is pull up topic 1, and we're just going to get started on topic 1. So by the way, something that you may have noticed from looking at Moodle is that my notes are not PowerPoints. I will post the PowerPoints eventually. Usually I don't post them right away. I mean, I could post old ones, but every semester I'm always doing little tweaks, and sometimes one semester I decide to talk about one thing, and the next semester I don't. And so I'm trying to put the most up-to-date ones. And so in most cases, the PowerPoints themselves will not be posted until after the lecture. Sometimes if I'm organized enough, I'll get them up beforehand. But all of the notes for all the topics will be up ahead of time, the ones that you can print off. And but the PowerPoints will be afterwards. And you can use the PowerPoints for studying. I just probably won't have them up in advance. It'll probably be afterwards. So let's take a look at topic 1. Topic 1 and topic 2, I'm hoping are going to kind of be a review for you. If I'm going fast, please let me know, slow me down. I'm just trying to hit some certain beats and talk about some certain things that will kind of get us ready for the semester. So topic 1 is all about introduction to the cell, so a little bit of history, scientific method, and a few other things in there. So you can think of it as life, the universe, and everything. So there's a little globe there, and you probably know what biology is. It's the study of life. And we can break down the different components of biology into kind of these hierarchies. So if you think about these hierarchies, we've got ecosystems, communities, populations, organisms. And if you take Biology 108, this is kind of a lot of the stuff that we talk about in Biology 108. So ecosystems and evolution and a lot of different types of organisms, plants and fungi and animals and whatnot. Biology 107 is a little bit more zoomed in. We're going to be focusing on the cell, and we're going to be focusing on molecules and organelles and a bunch of the processes that are taking place in those different cells and whatnot. So that's a good thing to talk about. Let's talk about what is a cell. So actually that's a little bit later. Let's just talk about life and living first. So biology is the study of life. My little video, this is supposed to be a video, it's not running. There's a little guy there, it's a Giardia. He's got 2 nuclei and he swims around, it looks like a little alien. I'll show you some pictures of him in a later lecture. Let's talk a little bit about what is life. It's a good cereal too, so I thought I'd throw that little box in there. So life is something that's really hard to define. It's kind of one of those things that, you know, we see it and you recognize it, but how do we define it? Because, you know, if you talk about something that's moving, well, that's not all life, that's an animal, right? A fungi doesn't walk around or whatever. But so one way to define life is kind of think about the different characteristics that a living thing may have. For example, order or organization is part of life, and we can see that definitely in living things. And you can see there's it looks like a sunflower or some sort of flower, and the organization is evident. But not everything that is organized is alive. You know, think about your cell phone. That's not alive, but certainly has order and organization to it. So does a salt crystal. That's organized, but not alive. Living things also reproduce. So you can see there's a polar bear and her offspring. I love this picture for a number of reasons because you may have noticed that the textbook is the 3rd Canadian edition. So there used to be just a Campbell's Biology. There never used to be a Canadian edition. And so when they did the Canadian edition, one of the things they did was they changed the language, right? So, you know, using Canadian spellings versus American spellings, and it features Canadian scientists. And another thing they did was change some of the pictures of the animals. So, of course, what's more Canadian than a polar bear? Because all of us Canadians see polar bears all the time. I thought it was pretty funny because it went from a grizzly to a polar bear. And there's grizzly bears in Canada. But anyway, interesting what editors will do. Living things grow and they develop. They process energy. This is an important one, right? Because not everything processes energy out there. But then there's non-living things that process energy. Again, your cell phone is a good example. Something that's organized and doesn't process energy, but it does not reproduce, at least by itself. Maybe at a factory, somebody reproduces it, but that's something different. It's more of a parasite, I guess. Response to the environment. Here's a Venus flytrap. You can see it's grabbing that insect, and you know, I can almost picture that insect getting snatched out of walking around on the leaf. Homeostasis and regulation. So you probably learned a little bit about that in high school. Often when I'm in person, I ask people, why does a rabbit or a hare, this is an Arctic hare, why does it show homeostasis and regulation? And we're featuring its ears, actually. Rabbits and hares have big ears, and they're used for hearing, but something they also do is use it to cool themselves down or warm themselves up. So when they're hot, they spread their ears out, and there's a lot of blood that goes through their ears. It allows them to cool down. And when they're too cool, they tuck their ears down and keep them warm. Another characteristic of life is evolutionary adaptation. So what does that mean? You know, the whole idea about survival of the fittest, where some young survive, some offspring survive, and some do not. And those are the ones that are going to spread their genes to future generations. So let's talk about what is a cell. I thought this was a kind of a cute little funny picture. I'll try to share some cute little funny pictures with you over the semester. Some people at this point, you know, give me some answers, and they may say it's like a building block or something like that. And that's actually a pretty good kind of definition, right? Cells are basic building blocks of all living things. And so you can see there's a couple of cells there. This is a eukaryotic cell from an animal, and there's a bacterial cell there. And so a cell could be one entire organism in the case of a bacterium, or in the case of other organisms, it could be millions or trillions of cells. So humans are something like 30 trillion cells. Maybe a few more if you're a bigger person, or a few less if you're kind of tiny. But all living organisms have cells. They carry out all the important functions of the body. They provide structure, they metabolize nutrients, and importantly, they also contain the body's hereditary material, so the instructions for building the organism, and the instructions are going to be propagated to the offspring, of course. There's many types of cells. We're going to be talking about some of these types of cells. We're going to be talking about fungi and plants and animal cells and bacterial cells, all of those types quite a bit. They come in many, many shapes and sizes. Here's our DNA. We're going to be talking about DNA a lot in the last third of the course. So topic 13 to 19 is going to be all about DNA and all about what it does. So it's an amazing molecule. So we'll talk a lot about that in the last part of the course. So a couple more things before we finish up today, kind of just tying together this whole idea of the study of life. Are cells alive? So let's just take a look at our list. Characteristics of life. Do cells have organization? They do. Do they reproduce? They do. Do they grow? Yes. Do they utilize energy? Of course they do. They do photosynthesis and respiration and a whole bunch of other things. Do they respond to the environment? Yes. Do they have homeostasis? Do they have evolutionary adaptation? Yes. So cells are the basic building blocks of life. So of course they are living by definition. But I do want to talk about just for a minute about viruses. And so there's lots of talk about viruses right now. Here's the one that's been causing us all the trouble this past year, this coronavirus called SARS-CoV-2. And so what is a virus? Not everyone seems to know the answer to that. Here's a definition from, I don't think it's our textbook, a different textbook. You can see that it says it's acellular. So viruses don't have cells. They're infectious, you probably know that part. And it says they contain nucleic acids and they're surrounded by a protein coat. So that's really what a virus is. It's some nucleic acids. It could be DNA or RNA, so some genetic instructions, and it's wrapped up in a protein coat. So here's the SARS coronavirus. You can see it's an RNA virus. So this is the RNA genome in here in the middle, and it's got a protein coat around it. And this one has a couple of other features, like some viruses, like this spike protein. This is what we're talking about when we talk about our vaccines. So that's what a virus is. And so what do? They get into cells, they deliver their genetic information, and the genetic information says, make more viruses. And that's kind of what viruses do. So we'll talk a lot about them when we get to, after the first couple of topics, we'll talk a lot about viruses. Just to kind of finish off today, the big question is, of course, are these things alive? So again, looking at our list here, I want to just take a look at our list because the answer is that most scientists would probably say no, there's kind of in a gray fuzzy zone, right? For example, are they organized? Of course, they're organized. I just showed you a picture of them. They've got this nice protein coat. They've got these spike proteins around the surface. There's definitely some organization there. Do they reproduce? Not on their own. Not on their own. They need cells. They're parasites. They live inside cells. The cells reproduce them. Do they grow? Again, not on their own, I guess would be the way to say. They don't grow bigger. They just are replicated cells. Do they use energy? No. Do they respond to the environment? No. So it doesn't look like they're much more than just particles. Homeostasis? No. They do adapt though. They can mutate. We need a new flu shot every year. That's because they are adapting and changing. So they have some characteristics of life, but for the most part, you can think of them as very, very complex particles with instructions inside of them. Anyway, it looks like that's about where I wanted to finish today, and our time is up anyway. So there will be no lecture on Friday. I will see everybody on Monday, and hopefully you have a wonderful weekend, and hopefully you enjoy this class. If you have any questions, please do contact me, and I will answer them as soon as I can.